Hi! So this is my fourth and my final entry into this progress log. I ended up doing a lot less entries than I had originally intended, but c'est la vie. That's just how it goes. Especially with this being like the end of the semester. Sorry, my hair is doing like weird things. Especially with this like being the end of semester, I just had so many other projects that I had to do, and this kind of took a back burner. Like, I think I kind of explained this before, that it was just kind of in the back of my mind. And that's why I was so late with like doing all my research and stuff like that. Anyway, yeah, so I ended up just kind of belting it out and working extremely hard, and it was exhausting, and I'm tired. I haven't had a good night's sleep in days, and I'm a little depressed because like it was so all-encompassing, like it was so all-consuming writing this story, that now it's like kind of almost the depression of the story, because it is a tragedy. It's not a happy story. Kind of is lingering, like my mindset is still there, and yeah, so I'm a little sad, but I'm happy. It's done. You can't see it, but there it is. Recreation by Brittany McDonald. That's me. It's a whopping 24-page novella, and yeah, I'm happy with it. I like it. I'm not sure if anyone else will, but I want to talk about like the ending, because as I was writing it, like the story evolved and changed in strange ways that I wasn't expecting, and I just kind of went with it. In the original ending, like the ending that I had planned and written down, and I can say this now because it doesn't end like this. And I hear a kettle. It was Gasparo, who is the artist of the portrait. He ended up killing the model for the portrait, who I named Perina. But in this new revision, the ending is much different, and I like it better. I think it's a lot more haunting this way, and a lot more lingering, and I think good tragic books, the ending has to linger with you, and it has to stay with you. Anyway, so the ending changed. He doesn't actually kill her. He actually ends up being part of the tragedy, that her story ends sadly, but his does as well. Like, it's like they both suffer because of all of this that's happening around them, because of the times, and like, I suppose that's where the historical fiction part comes in. There's a lot of odd scenes in the book, and scenes that not even I understand, but that I wanted in there. Like, there are parts of the book that are very creepy. At one point, Casey, who is the protagonist from the modern day, like, part of the book takes place in the modern day, and that's with Casey Shepherd, who is this female Sorry, my screen went dark. I don't know why. Probably because it's not plugged into anything. Oh well. Casey is like this, she's a forgery artist, to put it very bluntly, and I'm not spoiling anything by revealing that. She paints fraudulent paintings for people to sell, and that's how she makes her living. And it ended up being like a good 1/3 at the beginning of the story was exploring kind of this odd world of art forgery and how it worked and how it didn't work. And I ended up doing a little bit of research on that because I wanted to be accurate in the representation of like the tricks that you do see her use. I wanted them to be believable. So I wanted her to be believable, I guess. So a good portion of the story takes place in the modern day with Casey. The other portion of the story takes place in 16th century Italy with the original artist of the portrait, Gasparo di Giglioli. I can't really pronounce his name, and I'll talk about the names and what went on there in a second, because I just ended up finalizing them today, and I'll talk about how I did that and what went on with that. I'll also talk about the books I ended up reading and some of the research I did. Yeah, so, and then there's like one section, like one paragraph, where it's just Purina, Purina is the girl in the portrait. She's the model, and in the story she's getting married, and her father, as a gift to her future groom, decides that he wants a portrait done of her in her wedding ensemble, because it's not just a gown. She has a big headpiece, and if you've seen the portrait, which if you have been watching those vlogs you obviously have because it was in the first one, it is an ensemble. Like, it's so ornate. Anyway, Purina is this young girl, and she's getting married, and her father wants a portrait done of her to give as a marriage gift to her future groom, whose name is, I'm probably not pronouncing this correctly, and it's Puagara, something like that. Like I said, I'll get to the names and how I chose them and why I chose them in a second. Anyway, in modern day, Casey is making a reproduction of this painting, but she's having a little trouble with it for certain reasons that I don't really want to reveal. You'll have to read the story. But she's having issues with it, and she's having some problems doing the face, and it kind of switches back and forth between modern day and 16th century, and that wasn't part of my original intention with the story. That's something that kind of evolved and changed, because originally I had just wanted the 16th century part to be seen through flashbacks that she was having, because, as I said before, this is kind of a story about reincarnation, though it's never actually mentioned in the story, and that was a conscious choice, and that was a choice I made did it again. That was a choice I made. Changing my original intention. Again, my original intention, Casey finds out that she's the reincarnation of this artist that ended up killing his model, or his muse. The story that I've made, the final product, that doesn't happen. She realizes to an extent, like she's consciously aware that she is having dreams about her being in the body of another person, but she doesn't outright say, I'm the reincarnation of this man. And it's very, at the very end, that she even kind of formulates in her head that this might not be just a dream. Because these dreams that she's having are very strange. And she's interesting. She was an interesting character to write, because she goes from like this very solitary kind of existence of very bitter and jaded sarcasm and need for solitude and alone time. And she changes, kind of, not the solitary part, but she changes, and she goes from like this very logical figure with a few strange little quirks to like someone that's almost hysterical. Like she's so stressed and consumed, and I think my own mental state was very much a factor in my final product, because in the story Casey can't sleep, and when she does, she's having like these very weird, very vivid, strange nightmares that when she wakes up she can't really remember, and then she starts remembering like bits and pieces of them, but it's not but by the end of it she's exhausted and crying and just on the floor, like absolutely throwing a fit and just going mental because she hasn't slept and she can't get this picture right. And I felt that because as I was writing this, I wasn't sleeping. I was just so intent on getting it done and getting it out, like giving it. And I wanted so much to have it on paper, to have it finished, to look at it and be like, okay, now I can relax. This is the first novella I've ever written. It's the first historical fiction I've ever done, and it's probably one of my longest pieces of work, standalone works. I forget how many pages it is. I think it's around 27, well, 24 to 27. I can't remember the exact number of pages that it ended up being, but it's certainly very large extent. It's very time consuming. So, in the original idea, in the original drafts I had, Casey did not, there was no point in the story where I was telling it from the point of view of the original artist, Gasparo. But then I realized that as I was writing the story about Casey, he needed his own story. Him and his experiences with Purina and what had occurred, I wanted to tell their story. And it actually ended up working out really well, because the ending for Casey is about a page or two. Stop doing that. Okay. It's about a page or two before the ending for Purina and Gasparo. They go on for a little bit longer than she does. And I thought that was fitting because in the end, what happened with him almost answers what went on with her. Like, his inability to paint anymore explains her inability to create her own work. Because in the story, she is an amazing painter. She can recreate anything, specializing in oils. She can recreate anything, and especially out of the Renaissance period, but she cannot create anything of her own. She says that she has no muse, whereas in the ending of Gasparo's story, he loses his. So it kind of comes full circle, because Casey is supposed to be the reincarnation of Gasparo, and she has no muse. And obviously his soul, and he talks about his soul, and he talks about Purina's soul, and I, as the narrator, though it's not told in my voice, but the narrative voice it is told in talks about Gasparo, about how Gasparo's work had lost its soul. And I think the idea of the soul is a very tricky concept, because that kind of ethereal spirit, or that kind of thing inside of you that makes you who you are, is a very personal thing, and people have many different beliefs about it, and I wanted to present this without alienating anybody. So I wanted it to be very open. I didn't want to follow any religious path with it. I wanted it to kind of be devoid of that, so that I wouldn't send anybody off. But it is a spiritual story in a sense. So let's talk about the name. The name of the story is Recreation, and I chose that for a number of reasons. Originally I was just going to title it after the portrait, which was Portrait of a Lady, but after writing Casey, and after writing what happened with Gasparo and Purina, and the kind of overwhelming theme of recreating something and redoing things, I thought that it made sense, because in Casey's life, her job is to recreate things, and Gasparo, without giving away the ending, is like it ends up, that kind of idea plays a significant part in his kind of story, his ending. And then there's the whole idea of reincarnation, which is just another form of recreation. So I thought it was extremely fitting. The names of the characters, we have several names. The first is Casey Shepherd, who is the woman, who is the modern day woman. She's the forgery artist. She lives in Vancouver, and I don't know why I chose that name. I just, as I was writing out the first paragraphs, it just kind of came to me that I wanted to name her Casey. And the Shepherd is because I've been playing a lot of Mass Effect, and Commander Shepard is who you play in Mass Effect. So that's why that happened. Sorry, a bit of a nerd. Gasparo di Giglioli. I can't pronounce that very well. I used to be a member of the SCA, and in the SCA you create personas. And they have incredible resources of looking up names that were popular during certain times. And in the 16th century, Gasparo was on a list of masculine names, and it just kind of stood out to me. Because as I was writing him, he had a very distinctive feel about him, and he felt like a Gasparo or something like that. And I felt like making him have like a really fancy last name, because Italians are like, especially Italian artists, are famous for those, like Da Vinci and other Italian artists that I can't recall but probably know. So I felt like he needed a fancy name, and that was on a list of surnames. And then you have Perina Cavassa, who is the girl in the portrait. Perina was also on a list of female names from the 16th century, and I just felt that it was so pretty and delicate, and it just kind of fit her, because, well, you've seen the portrait. It's a very pretty, delicate woman, and in the story I wanted her to seem even more so, like almost fae-like. And she's also, it also sounds like a young girl's name to me. I'm not sure. Like, my name's Brittany. Like, that's a pretty young girl's name. But I thought that this was a pretty sweet little name, and I thought it was fitting. Then of course you have the elder Cavassa, who is Perina's father. He has a first name, but it's only mentioned once in the story, and then is only for, yeah. He's an interesting fellow. He's a naval commander. Pergera, who is Perina's husband, or becomes Perina's husband. He doesn't have, like, I never give him a first name, and I don't think he needs one. It's not because he's a minor character, because he ends up playing a very specific role, but I just felt I wanted to only give first names, or when I was writing, I felt that the only people that needed to be called by their first names, like in the story, Perina is never called Cavassa, and Casey is never called Shepherd, and Gasparo, it's only like other characters that call him Di Giglioli. When I'm writing him, I don't call him by his last name, and I thought that created a little bit more intimacy, so you could identify the main characters and the main players. The other people, like Perina's father Cavassa, Pergera, who is her future husband, and there might be like one more in there that I'm forgetting because I'm dumb, but you never really find, like, well, with Perina's father you do find out his first name, but it's only, like I said, it's only mentioned once. But yeah, I wanted to keep that kind of theme. And of course, that lovely website also had a beautiful list of Italian cities, and when I compared them to a map, because Perina's father was a naval commander, and so I knew that they would have to live close to the coast. So they live in Ancor, because I didn't want to give them a place that was very, very well known. I wanted to give them a place that was a little bit more special. So yeah, so they live in Ancor. I don't even think I'm pronouncing that right, but that's where they go. And then later, Gasparo later Kasparov was to Voltaire or something that sounds like that. Voltaire, yeah, he goes to Voltaire. Yeah. So really, that website was super helpful, and it's basically it's the website that's listed as the Academy of that's sponsored by the Academy of St. Gabriel or something like that. And yeah, they're extremely handy. There are other sources I list on there, and I said that I would talk about the books I read, but they are on the other side of my computer. So, yeah, one was The Renaissance, A Short History by Joe Madison. Just one second. They're actually not there, so I do not know where they are. What's this book? What are you? That's not helpful. Okay. Anyway, they're listed on there. One of them is, I forget who they're by, but one of them is Renaissance, A Short History, and I actually read all of that because it was incredibly interesting. The second one is, and it wasn't that long, so I didn't feel... Did you hear that? Those were my tired bones cracking. The second one was a huge book, and it was mannerisms in... Oh wait, they're over there. Huh. Okay. The Renaissance, A Short History by Paul Johnson. Paul Johnson. I got this from the library. It was really interesting, like pretty crazy, and it's a really short book, like it's not that big. So I ended up actually reading all of it. Yeah, it was a good read. The second one was Mannerism in Italian Music and Culture, 1530 to 1630. So that one was a good one. I did not have time to read all of it because it's huge. You can't see, but it's big. And the print is tiny. Like, in case you were like looking at it and you're like, that's not that big. It's big because the print is tiny. Yeah, and this is by Maria Rica Manietas. I suck at pronouncing names. Don't hold that against me. Yeah, so that's there. She's a cool lady. But yeah, the section in here I focused on was mannerisms in art, and it was only like a 30-page section, and really it was like the only other thing. The other books I read was The Evolution of Women's Asylums since 1500. It was an interesting read, and it's not that long, but it was pretty irrelevant to what I was doing, so I didn't list it as a source, but I did read it. And then everything else was like online sources and stuff like that, so yeah. I'm happy it's all over, and the story is actually now up, or will soon be up. It will be up tonight on Amazon for download. I'm going to try and make it free, but I'm not exactly sure how Amazon self-publishing works. So I'm going to try and make it free. If I can't, it's going to be 1 cent. And you can look it up under RE-CREATION. Recreation by me, Brittany McDonald. I'll hold it up to the camera. So hopefully you can see that. Hopefully you go look it up. Hopefully you read it, and you let me know how it is. Alright guys? Love you. Bye. Can I get